everything I touch, I try to touch from the perspective of anti-racism and environmentalism.
Yeah.
So any decision, I kind of run through those filters first. Like you can make tiny decisions, and they end up being big decisions.
It's Uncommon Good, the podcast where we talk with ordinary people doing uncommon good in service of our common humanity. I'm Paulie Reese. Fam, today's guest, Philly's own favorite son, James Jackson. He's an activist. He's a technical theater professional. He is a professional photographer and a boatsman to boot. Quick content warning off the top. We talk a lot about the fallout from the overturning of Roe. We talk a lot about the senatorial debate between Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman. We recorded the day after that was televised. So if either of these things are things that you don't need to hear, things that are not right for you, feel free, switch off. We'll see you in the next one. Otherwise, we talk about surviving the lockdowns, James's thoughts about personal freedoms, fair wages in theatrical work, and a little bit of Pacific Northwest indigenous lore thrown in for good measure. This conversation was just, so many laughs, so many times the soul was just touched. It was incredible. Please enjoy my conversation with James. It's nice to finally get to chat to you after what feels like a very unexpected and, for me at least, a reasonably intense collaboration during the summer lockdowns.
Yeah.
Because we met during the running of the encampments in the Ben Franklin Parkway and on Ridge Avenue.
Yeah.
For you, what was lockdown like for you?
So, COVID lockdown. At the beginning, I said, like my entire career has always been bringing large numbers of people into small spaces to see and hear things and to yell and shout a lot. So
yeah.
So that's my entire career. What am I gonna do now? We're not supposed to be in small enclosed spaces sharing breath so much. So
right.
So yeah, it was a little bit a little weird.
Right.
One thing that you may not have noticed, the beginning of lockdown, I own and operate a company that my first career was in freelance photography, and
okay.
One of the things I concentrate on is travel photography. And my wife likes to travel. I like to travel.
Outstanding.
And we had a goal before we would enlarge our family at all. We would travel to all 7 continents. About March of 2019, we booked our trip to Antarctica, and in March of 2020, we were traveling in Antarctica. Timeline-wise, for those that weren't as keyed in on the dates, we left the U.S. The information about COVID had started breaking. The president at the time had made some announcements that this is a disease. It's coming out of China. There were some travel restrictions, but not really much. Most of it was inbound into the U.S. There were a couple of travel restrictions here and there. And to go to Antarctica, there's basically only one departure point, and that's Ushuaia in Argentina.
Oh, okay.
So everybody goes to Ushuaia in Argentina, and you board your boat there. There's one other way to get to Antarctica, which is to fly to an island that has an airport that's about halfway down. That's across the strait.
Sure.
And meet your boat there, but who wants to do that? That's no fun.
That's no fun at all. What I would love to know is is there a particular season when you can and cannot fly, or even can and cannot even get in by boat? Like, is there the potential, like a causeway being flooded a couple of times a day, that you could be stuck?
It's not that so much as Antarctica does experience the same thing as the Arctic, whereas there's about 5 months of solid no sunlight.
Oh,
So the sun sits on the horizon, and then just dips below the horizon, and then comes up a little bit, but dips back down.
oh, sure.
And so for about 6 months, 5 6 months, you have no sun in the sky, um, and the weather gets worse. It's not good year round, but
Yeah.
it gets worse. And so winters are pretty big there. So
Okay.
yeah, there is a season, and it is our winter. Most of the sailings are in. They start up in January, early January, and then they sail through the end of March, April. Um, Interestingly, we were on the last trip that our particular boat was taking to Antarctica that season, and then they
Yeah.
were going to go. Once they returned to Ushuaia, they were going to deboard everybody, and then just a service crew was going to sail it back to Denmark, which is where they're based.
Oh, wow.
For refit.
That's a long hike.
It's about a 2 week sail, yeah.
Okay.
So all this becomes interesting when the timeline comes into play, because we departed as Argentina was considering a shutdown of its borders, and the trip to Antarctica is about a week and a half, 2 weeks in total.
Sure.
So we were gone and pretty much incommunicado for about 10 days. And then as soon as we started picking up communications again, we found out that Argentina had closed its borders. Well, we had left from Argentina with the plan of returning to Argentina. We hadn't really actually left Argentina, because when you go sail out of Ushuaia to Antarctica and then back to Ushuaia, you're not exiting the country, because you're not entering any other country.
Oh, international waters, etc.
Right. So you're just returning to the port of departure.
Uh-huh.
So there was a question as to, can we get back in? And long story long, Argentina said no. Argentina was like, yeah, you guys have been out of the country, and so we're not letting anyone back in. So now you have 150 people. This is a relatively small boat.
Sure.
150 people. None of us had been sick at all. Like literally, there hadn't even been cold. And we had followed COVID check protocol boarding the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have basically an international incident at this point. We had people on board from Kuwait. We had people from the U.S. We had people from Ireland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, literally everywhere. And as we got closer and closer, we're all hammering the small bandwidth that the little satellite link that the boat has pretty hard, trying to arrange things and get flights taken care of, etc. So the main communication that the boat has is also via that satellite link. So they were like begging us to stop using the internet so much so that they could get their communication with their home office. So they rerouted us. They first said that Argentina said they would let us come into Buenos Aires.
Okay.
So that's an extra 4 days sail from Ushuaia.
Okay.
So as we sailed north, we were right along the coast, basically out a little bit, but within occasional shot of like cell tower boosting. So a lot of us could get data at that point. So we caught up on the news and found out about everybody shutting down their borders and how difficult it was going to be to get back home. So then some conversations happened around okay, well, this boat is going back to Denmark. Where are you going to go? And we were like, well, my wife works for the federal government, and she's not going to be aboard this boat for 2 weeks because they can't literally do their work without her. I'm perfectly fine going on this boat to Denmark. I'm fine with it. You take me there. I'll spend 6 months there, but my wife can't.
Yeah.
So then as we get close to Buenos Aires, Argentina again said no. We're not letting you land the boat here. Argentina is right across from Uruguay, and Uruguay's capital is right there.
Is that Paramaribo or Montevideo?
No. Montevideo.
Okay.
So Montevideo is right there, and so the boat operating company contacted the Montevidean government and the Uruguayan government, and they were like, hey, we're kind of stuck. The Uruguayan government agreed to let the boat dock, but only for provisioning. And then in what is an interesting ploy, the captain of our boat basically refused to leave the dock. And they can't make him. It's a big boat. They can't tow it off the dock or anything. So our captain basically said, no, I will not leave this dock until you deboard my passengers.
Sure.
And so it becomes a weird international incident. And there's every consulate was coming down to this provisioning pier. And provisioning piers are like, if you think of the Philadelphia waterfront, you have the Penn's Landing area where all the people go.
Right.
And you have the area where they unload all the cars.
Yes.
That nobody goes there.
Yes.
That's what a provisioning pier is like.
Okay.
So, it's just designed for trucks and
shipping and freight
to come to a boat and not people. But every day you had all these consulate members from, I think it was something like 40 different countries we had represented on the boat, coming down to this provisioning pier and standing within eyesight of all of us, and talking to us on cell phones and stuff. And the most people we had were from the U.S., but oddly, I got roped into being the representative of all of us because I was the one who reached out to the most people, and in the first place I had the most connections to government type people. So I reached out to everyone. I even reached out to Cassie's boss, which she later got really mad at me for. But there is a set of plans in place for people who work for the government and are important enough, if they're stuck someplace, to be evacuated.
Sure.
And he gave me the number and the code word to call if I needed to pull that. so yeah, it would have ended up with a U.S. military helicopter landing on this provisioning pier and basically dragging Cassie off and flying her home. But
so,
yeah.
So Cassie, your spouse almost got James Bonded out of there.
There's a scene in what is it? Patriot Games, where they fly down with a helicopter and pick up Jack Ryan. And I keep teasing her that's gonna happen to her one day. Because it actually probably will, but she's one of 10 people who knows what she knows. And so she
oh no.
she's considered a relatively important person by certain people that have certain buttons. But yeah,
should I have gotten government clearance for us to have this interview today?
No. I don't know enough. And she often
Yeah,
says
yeah.
she doesn't know anything either. That may just be a government ploy. But anyway.
Sure. We had a guest on the show from the director of religious education for the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that 90% of those sorts of classified things are largely very, very boring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and even having top secret clearance is almost meaningless because a lot of the top secret stuff isn't really non-public information. It's just it's classified top secret so that if somebody's gathering that particular type of information, it sets off red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, there are other classifications that are above top secret. Top secret isn't all that, but then there are some things, like the stuff that was found at Mar-a-Lago that are dangerous for people.
Of course. There are levels of secrecy that we don't even need to know about exist.
Right.
I hear you. Observation. I am reminded of that movie from back in the early 2000s with Tom Hanks and Catherine Zeta-Jones. You got the terminaled, but on a boat. I wonder, does any of this play into the love of boating and the sea? I know one of the things that I was so excited to talk to you about is that you recently started fixing up a boat.
Yeah, I mean, these things don't play into that love so much as they're the execution of that love of boating, and travel in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did. I bought an O'Day 322 from 1989. O'Day is a now defunct yacht building company that was a U.S. based company. They made really great boats.
This boat is now a collectible.
Nobody's gonna collect it. It's like I'm trying to think of a equivalent in the car market. I'm you know how Dodge is now owned by Chrysler.
Yes.
But
yes.
it at one time was its own company.
Yes, and was purchased by a bigger company. Yeah.
So think if Chrysler had purchased Dodge and then just disbanded the name. It's a mid-rate, relatively common yacht, but it's not it's not collectible. It's just nice. So we always talk about people having yachts and planes and cars and expensive things.
Sure.
And I'm always trying to find inexpensive ways to do those same things. And I'm not wealthy, but I own a yacht. I own a 32-foot boat, and it's called a yacht because it's 32 feet long. There's some technical differences between a yacht and a boat. But yeah, and I didn't pay a lot for it. And you mentioned I'm fixing it up. I'm doing all the work myself. I'm not like some millionaire or something. I don't even have $1 million, and that's nothing in today's terminology. But planes, the same thing. Like most of the planes out there flying are from the 70s, 60s and 70s, and they're these old, what was marketed to the general middle class. All these things were available to the middle class in America just 30, 40 years ago. Why aren't they available now? Why have we created this mythos around certain items as if they should be such a luxury that they're out of reach for everybody? And I don't think they should be.
That's such a good question, right? The question of what luxury is, what it does for us as people when we have the privilege of enjoying it, and how we, as a collective society, as humanity, get to decide who has access to it, right?
Right. Yeah, and I'm always trying to find a way to give more people access to stuff like
Hmm.
that. I don't think that it should be. I get. I know several people who have all these fears and phobias, and uh, I don't even know what to call them, but psychological things built around travel,
Hmm.
as if it's this thing that only other people get to do. I have one
Yeah.
friend she's a great activist. She's a great producer. She's all over the city, and she's she's not poor. She's not under the poverty line. She's not somebody who's struggling. Um, she's not wealthy either. But I've had many conversations with her about, hey, I love travel and I would love to share that with you as a friend of mine. What do you think about, like if I plan this trip, would you consider going with us? And she has all these blocks built into it that it creates like tension in our relationship as friends,
Hmm.
even to just broach the topic that way. And it's very frustrating for me because like that's how I display my friendship is that I have things that I want people to that I enjoy that I want to share with other people.
Hmm.
Um and but yeah, it's wild to me that these things that should be within reach for everybody, really. I don't think anybody should be locked to being stuck in one place if they don't want to be. um I find it frustrating that people build up uh, these things as something that's unattainable for them.
I'm reflecting on that a moment, and I think I noticed two culprits in that sort of system that feel very devious and very, I'll say it, perhaps even potentially evil. The the sense that the system that we live in is designed so that some people, not just not just in terms of the experience of luxury or an act that a person can take, but there is some sort of personhood associated with their humanity, their core being, that they are less deserving of the good and good things. There is something about our system that says that. That and so,
I mean it's like the like the restrictions they set up around like food stamps.
yes.
Okay, so you have food stamps, so you, there's suddenly a list of things that you can't buy.
Yes.
And there's also suddenly a ceiling to your income.
Yes.
Otherwise, you lose that assistance. And then there's a gap if you lost that assistance, but you're not making up that assistance by beating that income, where it's not like they scale it back. It's just an all or nothing thing.
Yes. Yes.
Why are people at the low end of an income scale not as deserving of a steak for dinner or
Mm.
lobster thermidor or uh, you know,
Mm.
I understand from an economic standpoint or even a conservational standpoint, pricing, say, what did they closed the snow crab for the season?
Sure.
Because the snow crab, due to climate change, are moving closer to Russian waters, and the mariners can't go there to fish those waters. So the price of snow crab is obviously going to be insanely high this winter.
Of course. Yeah.
Um, and I understand, like supply demand. You don't have it, you can't sell it for as cheap. You need to raise your prices so that demand goes down, and you can keep up with your demand. Fine. That all makes sense. But if I'm going to give somebody assistance and guarantee them food, why am I only guaranteeing them food that's unhealthy or processed or junk or something that I wouldn't eat myself? Why am I not providing enough assistance that they could eat
Yeah.
as well as I do?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I don't know. These are the kinds of things that cause my activism. Like, these kinds of thoughts are the kind of thing that I um so one of the things I do is I have a production company. We work on
Yeah.
events, we work on theater, we work on film and television and advertising, Light Thief Productions. And one of the reasons I founded it is because I got frustrated working in the industry for
Yeah.
other people who always seem to decide things in a way that I wouldn't decide them.
Yeah.
So, when you're deciding the budget of a show,
Right.
um, you generally start out with a rough framework, a rough idea of what you're going to spend on things.
Yes.
And I, at the time, around the time I started to do this production company, a lot of people were really undercutting what they were willing to pay people.
Yeah.
Um, Minimum wage is still $7.28, I think, $7.28 an hour
I think you're right.
in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of companies basically saying that's all that they were willing to pay stagehands. Now stagehands, don't get me wrong, oftentimes don't have to do anything specialized. They have to
Sure.
do the basics of what anybody who is working has to do. A lot of people call that unskilled labor. I'd say there's several skills involved in doing what everybody else has to do to show up for a job, because some days I am not capable of all of them. But
Yeah.
but let's just call it general labor. General labor, they were saying, wasn't worth more than 7.25, 28 an hour.
Yeah.
I've always thought it was worth more than that. At the
Yeah.
time it was, let's see, that was about 2001, no, 2011.
Okay.
About 2011. The $15 an hour was starting to become not quite enough.
Right.
Especially for somebody who isn't guaranteed like a 30, 40 hour a week.
Right.
So I would often go back and say, I don't have enough budget for labor. And there would often be pushback, well, don't pay them so much. And that always came back to ending up me just doing extra work, because I wasn't going to pay people less than what they needed to survive, but also the job needed to get done.
Yes.
And in theater, there is still this the show must go on attitude. So I don't know. I don't know why we all believe that. It's very pervasive.
I suspect for me, there's this sense that we are the purveyors of the inspiration of the human spirit. If we don't do the work, then who will?
Right.
Right? At the same time, if nobody gives us or gives our team the money that they need for a fair day's work to be able to eat, keep their house warm, then who will?
Right. So, at any rate, that's why I was like, well, if I'm going to pay these people, maybe I should just take the whole project and take the decision making out of the hands of the people who are making these bad decisions, and therefore I can decide. And when I'm deciding, I could just say, no, it's going to cost you more money. It's a weird thing in production, because with clients, I can say, this is going to cost you $84,000. And there's not much that they can do to argue that. Whereas if I'm working for them and I say this labor is going to cost you $84,000, they're like, well, how can we save a couple of bucks? It's a weird thing. It's weird that I can package everything together and price it as a single commodity, and people are more willing to either take it or leave it, or versus if I'm working for them, they seem to think I have more latitude to change it.
I wonder why that is. It would seem that the intention should be that we want everyone to do a good job. So if we pay them a fair wage, a competitive rate, perhaps even just a tiny bit more, or maybe significantly more, then we'll get a better quality product. Right?
I mean, when you start doing business, I've been doing business as an entrepreneur type person for most of my life.
Sure.
I've been a freelancer. I've been owner of my own photo studio. I've been, I own this production company. I've done multiple indie films. I've done, all kinds of different things. But so there's these things that all business people, including freelancers, encounter. And when you start looking at other people's numbers, you realize how little labor is valued all across the marketplace. As far as like a capitalist marketplace, labor is valued at practically nothing. When you look at successful companies often budget things by thirds, which is so weird that it works out this way. But like a third of your budget is labor, a third of your budget is supplies, and a third of your budget is profit and goes back into the company. So successful companies often budget that way, and then they have that little 10%. Like if you do it actually at 30%, you have that little like 10% that you can take out and use as,
got it.
Like
okay.
That's your your gift to yourself.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at a project and the numbers work out right, to basically be thirds, I'm like, oh, okay, this budget will work. But then if you look into something like McDonald's, let's just take McDonald's as an example. Ooh, there's this outcry from, I don't really pull my punches with people that I think are morons, and these people are morons. But there's this outcry from people who think that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour will mean $50 Big Macs. Maybe it's not. I don't even know what they say. It's moronic. It's moronic because if you really look at the cost of a Big Mac, the cost of labor to build a single Big Mac is something like 8% of the cost. So even if you quadrupled the cost of labor to build that single Big Mac, it's not going to cost $50. It's not going to cost $17. It's not going to cost, it'll probably be the same. Actually, if McDonald's really wanted, they could keep the price the same, because most of their cost of the Big Mac, the consumer cost of the Big Mac, is profit. It's over 50% markup. It's over 100% markup. Like something like 60% of the price that you pay goes to the company as profit, and it gets split up from there because there's franchise fees, and there's the franchisee who's earning some of the money, and then there's the major franchise who's earning the lion's share of the money. Just saying, oh, if you increase the cost of labor to $15 an hour, it's going to lead to $17 Big Macs. That doesn't make any sense. I was in an argument today online, where most of my arguing happens. with a woman who is very anti-abortion. So the post in general was by an activist here in Philadelphia who's a progressive, and he posted one of Fetterman's campaign issues is that he will always be pro-choice. And one of Oz's campaign issues, and the quote that is being most frequently bandied about in left circles this morning, is Oz said that a pregnant woman's decision about whether or not to have an abortion should be between their doctor, themselves, their doctor, and their local politicians. Which makes no sense. Why are local politicians involved in this? And I would, as a progressive, go even further to say the doctor doesn't even really have a say in this. This conversation is for one person, and that's the person who is pregnant. Like, it's not a conversation. It is a decision that one person has to make. And he posted because he said, like, this election is about Roe v. Wade and the Dodd decision, which overturned at Roe v. Wade, and personal choice and the right to privacy. What he's very right about is that this election is very much about right to privacy.
Sure.
If people showing up to the polls don't like really hammer the Republican Party, like if it's another, like 25% of people vote and 10% of them vote Republican, if it's not like a landslide, we really have lost the narrative. Very few people are communicating the urgency of the Dodd decision. What that decision means is that nobody has the right to privacy. Nobody has any rights not enumerated in the Constitution, either in the original document or any amendment. There's a lot of stuff that we take for granted that isn't enumerated anywhere. And should we not, as a population, say, hey, we've caught on to this, we noticed what you did, and that's not right, by voting? If we don't do that, then it means that all the messaging that obscures what the real issue is working. So this woman responded that the abortion fight isn't important to everyone, and that there are a lot of other issues that voters need to consider. To be quite frank, no, abortion isn't a concern for everybody. It's a concern for people who are getting abortions. But the decision there, the freedom of choice, the right to personal privacy and personal decision making and autonomy, that's what's the issue. It was never about abortion. It has never been about abortion. Abortion is not, no Republican candidate gives flying crap about abortion. I can guarantee you. Sure. Like they'll play lip service to it. They'll say, "Oh, I'm a devout Christian. I don't want to see any babies destroyed, etc., etc." And to be honest, I love people. I love humans, and I don't want to see any baby die needlessly. At the same time, it's not my decision. It's not my choice. My opinion, my feelings don't matter. And this is where we're getting around to what I was arguing about. Why is it the fuck your feelings group that is so concerned with us honoring their feelings? This is all about feelings. The Republican Party, the messaging of the there is a group that is dedicated to returning to fascism, returning to an environment where you have to be male and wealthy to have a say in politics. There is actually literally a group of people that are doing that, and that's not conspiracy theory, that's just the facts. Like, that's just really what's happening, and they're very good at messaging. And the messaging is always about putting some sort of issue that pulls at emotion in front of an issue of personal freedom to obscure what it is that the end goal is. The end goal of the abortion fight, the end goal of the Dodd ruling is not and I may be misquoting that and I apologize if that's the wrong name.
Hey, listeners, it's Polly. The case that James is referring to is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. Back to James.
But the end goal of the ruling that overturns Roe v. Wade is not to overturn Roe v. Wade. If you read it, it has very, very little to do with abortion. And it actually literally doesn't say much about abortion. It doesn't say that this is to protect, unborn babies. This doesn't say, we need to ensure that, children are born and cared for before they can speak for themselves. All it says is there is no right to privacy enumerated in the Constitution. Therefore, this ruling, Roe v. Wade, and all the other rulings that used a right to privacy as the construction of the ruling are invalid. Well, there's a lot of law that's based on a right to privacy that the Supreme Court now says we don't have. It's a lot of law. And that kind of thing just, it infuriates me. It's bringing, law shouldn't be about feelings. Law shouldn't be about, and I think that's where the separation of church and state might have originally been coming from. Law shouldn't be about things that you feel in your gut. They shouldn't be about things that you intuitively understand. Law should be about protecting things that are real and solid and have a definitive answer and have facts behind them. I can say factually that any pregnancy can't survive until 23 weeks. Can't survive the death of the mother. I can say that factually.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. It's just there's never been a fetus that has been removed from the mother or a baby born after the mother's death that was younger than that.
Yes.
Just developmentally, they don't have skin, they don't have lungs, they don't there's a lot of things still to grow.
It's still like Franken fetus at that point.
Right. So I can say that factually. And
sure.
So, even though Roe v. Wade isn't perfect, it sets this viability standard for when we should be conferring protections onto a living human being. And viability as a standard, it's wishy-washy, but it's better. This woman said that she doesn't believe that abortion should take place after 15 weeks. All these numbers, they're arbitrary, they're wishy-washy. At the end of the day, abortion is a really hard choice, and it's not a choice that anybody else's feelings should factor into.
And a choice that I don't think anyone would ever want to have to make in either direction, to be in a situation where they have to seriously consider the medical ramifications, the socio-emotional ramifications on themselves to have to do that thing.
And then if you look into it, most abortions are chosen, like most people choosing abortion are choosing it because they can't economically afford a child, because they don't have support, because they don't have social support, because they don't have structural support in the way our country is set up.
Yeah.
If you want to end abortion, fix all that first. Why is that so hard to do? Why is that not where we're looking? So yeah, I get really obviously you can see I get really passionate about stuff like this, but it's um it's crazy making for me. I I don't know. My wife often says, James, you have uh such a belief in people in general, like that they'll decide things well, and that they're operating from a place of logic and understanding and intelligence. And I'm like, yeah, because I want to believe that. I want to believe that, you know,
You choose to.
right. Um, but I don't know. Maybe her way of dealing with it, being jaded, is better. I don't know. Maybe I should just switch. Maybe I should just be jaded.
Maybe it's better for the two of you that you balance each other out.
It is. It is a lot better. Yeah, we have a pretty strong relationship, and
Yeah.
I actually appreciate that I can bounce these frustrations off of her, and she'll just look at me and be like, "Oh, sweet simple child."
Oh.
But yeah.
There's something, as I've observed your work, you have the live stream, the podcast, coffee break chat, which we've talked about in the past. If you haven't seen it, go see it. You run it how many times a week? Like when
Just
you're
once a
running a
week.
season, just once a week. If it felt like it feels like so much more because I'm subscribed to your Facebook notifications, but you run the show, you run the boat, you run the production company. You are very committed to looking after the family and being like one of the people I know who is the most careful with their time to make sure that your time and all of the things that you're doing is grounded in your family. I would really love to know what sorts of things that you look to help you find that balance, to help you maintain what feels like an unending and relentless stream of energy to do it all. And when things are tough, when times are tough and morale is low, what helps keep the spirit buoyed?
Okay. So hopefully Cassie doesn't ever listen to this interview, 'cause she would wonder who you're talking about. No, I mean, she would say I overcommit. Um, I think, I think you're both right in different ways. I think that sometimes the reason why I'm so careful to try and make space for in my calendar for my family is because in the past that's been a sore spot. That's been a problem. That's been an area in which I could do better, and you can always do better. Always do better with work-life balance. It's not easy or intuitive or something that you can ever really stop working at, I don't think. I think work-life balance is key, though, to what you're saying. Like when I hit those times when the energy's running low, when I suffer migraines. If I have a migraine and like I just can't do anything that particular day, I have to rely on the fact that, well, another day I can put in more labor and more work and get the same amount done that I would have today
if you tried to push through it.
Right. So I am a big believer in the fact that if you're a person of color, you have to do things about twice as good to get about half the recognition. So,
Oh yes, I was
um,
always taught it was like 3 or 4. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, to get the one recognition, you have to do things 4 times as good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, and I come from a black and Asian household. And my mother is European, and
I'll set aside also that means that like you will have perfect skin on your deathbed. Like you will be the most glorious, beautiful corpse the world has ever seen.
even if I'm in my 90s, which it looks like it probably. My grandfather is in his 90s. He was stationed in Japan at the end of World War II, and that's how he met my grandmother. Um, so yeah, but I was gonna say the Asian household part. For those that don't have Asian heritage, Asian mothers and Asian grandmothers really expect you to excel at anything educational or information based.
Everything.
And artwork too. Like they don't let up there either. Like, if you're bad at music or painting or drawing, they will make sure that's what you do for the rest of your life until you know how to do it at least a little bit. Yeah. Um, like that's my grandmother's solution to. I have this vivid memory that I'm having a child is bringing up all these vivid memories of me growing up, and I have this vivid memory of really getting frustrated trying to learn the alphabet. And the American alphabet, in general.
Quick clarifying question.
Yeah.
Given your heritage
Yeah.
and all of the frustration that you had about learning the alphabet, had you exited the womb yet?
Oh yeah, yeah, I had. So, I don't remember how old I was, but I was living with my grandparents, so that puts me in the under 5 arena.
Okay.
So I don't think I was going to kindergarten yet because I was with my grandmother. So that means that it was during the day and I was with my grandmother. So that puts me pre-kindergarten, and this is the late 70s. They didn't have pre-K.
Yes.
Well, they had pre-K, but it was 1 year pre-K.
Yes.
And it was more like daycare. So I wasn't like 2. I was probably 3 or 4. My grandmother is trying to teach me the alphabet, the American alphabet, English, and I have this problem with learning almost anything. If I can't contextualize it, if I can't like understand what something stands for, it's very difficult for me to learn it. So all the rote things like times tables, the alphabet, all those like basic building blocks meant nothing to me.
And what is more symbolic of a thing one could learn than language?
Right. But language made sense to me. Learning words, I've always been able to learn words in context. Like I very rarely have to go to a dictionary for the meaning of a word. And that was a big advantage in high school and school in general. But the letters didn't mean enough. Like, you have A, it means apple, or it starts apple. And it's just these loose connections. The things that are loosely connected like that didn't and still don't to some extent make sense to me.
Sure.
It's like memorizing a credit card number. I can't memorize a credit card number. That string of numbers has no meaning. It has no reference.
Yes.
However, my driver's license number when I was in New Jersey, all the sections of your driver's license number in New Jersey actually have a meaning. And I could memorize my driver's license number in New Jersey because I figured out what the meaning of each section of numbers was.
All right.
Letters have no meaning. They have no meaning intrinsically of themselves. So, and learning the alphabet as a song with no meaning to it, it was very frustrating for me. My grandmother, who is Japanese, her solution was to just make me concentrate on the alphabet every day until I finally just learned it, you know. But that's for those that aren't of Asian heritage, that's what an Asian grandmother or an Asian mother will do. Is if you're not getting something, they will just hammer you on it until you finally just either go insane or learn it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Adopted, raised by whites, but model minority. Same thing.
Yeah. So you might notice a lot of my iconography, the things that I use as logos, the screen names I pick, etc., are Raven based.
Yes.
There is Pacific Northwest creature character mythos around the Raven. There's a lot of mythical creatures in the native histories of the Pacific Northwest, but the
Sure.
Raven is a bigger, more important one in the Pacific Northwest, and he's a trickster.
Yes.
Tricksterism in native cultures isn't a negative. And I often think that it shouldn't be in our cultures either. In European culture, but European culture a lot of time does drive tricksterism into the negative. But I'm just prefacing the story with that because the Raven is a trickster, but everything that he does is by way of making things better. So if he sees a problem, he corrects that problem, but the way he corrects that problem is always through trickery. The Man Who Sits on the Tides is the actual business name of my company with the boats. The Man Who Sits on the Tides is a Pacific Northwest story. It is mainly in the Tlingit and I may be mispronouncing that and Haida cultures. The Haida culture has the story of the man who sits on the tides, and the Raven, one day noticed that sometimes the water of the ocean is out, and the beach is full of fish and shells and things for humans and birds and other animals to pick up and eat or play with or make jewelry out of, etc.
Sure.
And then sometimes the water will come in and there's nothing for the humans to do. And Raven loves to eat. Raven loves to walk down the beach and collect shells and eat clams, and he didn't have any food. And so one day the tide came in and never went out. Didn't go out for a long, long time, and Raven was getting really hungry. So he flew north, and he found an elder, and he asked the elder, "Why is the water in?" The elder said, "I'm not sure, but why don't you go ask the man who sits on the fog?" And the Raven said, "What? There's a man who sits on the fog?" He said, "Yeah. If you fly east along this river." And this is an important river in the Pacific Northwest. I don't remember the name of it at the moment, but it's a trade route.
Yeah.
If you fly to east, you'll find the man who sits in the fog. So the Raven flies east, flies the whole length of the river, finds the headwaters of the river, and a fog begins to build. Well, just before the fog begins to build, he sort of notices there's a man in a big hat. And the man pulls down his hat, and the fog is billowing out from under it. So he goes and pesters the man who's in the big hat, and he says, "Do you know why the water is in?" And the man just pulls his hat down tighter, and the fog builds deeper. It's gonna do you no good to keep building the fog. I can see you. I know you're there. Would you just answer my question? Why is the water in? The man who sits on the fog pulls off his hat, and the fog stops building and dissipates a bit, and he says, I don't know. I just didn't want to talk to you. But if you fly west a lot, you'll find a big island, and I think that's where all the water comes from. So he flies west. He flies west for many, many days. Um, and he sees this huge island. And on the island, there's a man sitting. So he flies down closer and realizes it's not just a man, it's a huge man. It's a giant man. He's the size of 4 mountains.
Yeah.
So he flies down, and he lands on the man, and he says, "Excuse me, do you know why the water is in?" And the man says, "Go away." So the raven's like, I just have a question. Would you please answer my question? I just want to know why the water is in. He says, "Go away. I'm sitting. I'm taking a break." So the raven begins to fly away, and he notices that seagulls are gathering around the man, and the man stands up and swats at them, and then he sits back down. But as he stands up, a big hole opens up underneath of him, and all the water rushes in from the oceans. And then as he sits back down, it displaces the water, and the water goes back out again. So he's like, "Oh, I see." It goes back to the giant. Why aren't you?
Yeah.
Why aren't you getting up and letting the water in and out every day? Well, I don't. That's not my job. What do you mean that's not my job? You obviously have a job to do, and it's to stand up and sit down. No, I am the man who sits on the tides. That's not my job. It's not my job to let the water in. It's just my job to sit on the tide. The raven says, "This won't do." So the raven flies up, points his beak directly at the man's butt, flies as fast as he can, and stabs him in the butt. Well, the man stands up and jumps around and swats at his butt. And then he looks around to try and find the raven. The raven has flown off a good ways by this point, and the man can't find him.
Yeah.
So he sits back down. Well, the raven does this over and over and over and over again, many, 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 many times. And then eventually, he gets tired of doing this, and he flies a little ways off, and he just hovers there, and he notices that every once in a while the man will get up, stretch, look around, and then sit back down. So that's how we have tides. But yeah. So.
What a lovely story. And thank you. I wish we had more time for more glorious conversation, but we're near the end of our time. So I do need to ask you one final question.
Sure.
And you've touched on it a little bit, I suspect.
Okay.
That is, what do you want the world to look like when you're done with it?
Oh my, what a good question. What do I want the world to look like? Before I had a child, I grew up, and this comes from the African American community. My grandfather, who is a black man, always taught me to leave things better than I found them. So I always grew up with that. Leave things better than you found them. Leave them not just as you found them, not worse than you found them, but better than you found them. And that has always been a driving force in my life. Leave things better than you found them. Now that I have a child, I find that what I want to do is leave the world changed into a place where she can grow up without experiencing the same things that I did that are negatives.
What is one tiny thing, the smallest thing, like buying a coffee small, that you do to move yourself, move your world one step closer to that vision?
There's a lot of things. Tiny. Things that I do without thinking about them really. Use reusable bags.
Yeah.
I don't use straws, but I've never liked straws. That wasn't even really a choice. Even tinier than that. Really everything I touch, I try to touch from the perspective of anti-racism and
Yeah.
environmentalism.
Yeah.
So any decision, I kind of run through those filters first. And I don't think that's it's both tiny and big because like you can make tiny decisions and run them through those filters and they end up being big decisions then, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
From the depth of my core, and for our conversation today, very grateful for your time.
I really appreciate your time.
My thanks to my guest, James Jackson. Find out more about his production company, Light Thief Productions, his photography company, Raven Eyes, and his charter sailing company, Man Who Sits on the Tides, at his websites in the episode description below. Thanks for tuning in to Uncommon Good with Polly Reese. This program is produced in Southwest Philadelphia on the unceded land of the Lenni Lenape tribe and the Black Bottom community. If you enjoyed listening to the show, please support us by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find us. Uncommon Good is also available on YouTube and Instagram. Follow us there for accessible video content and more goodies. We love questions and feedback. You can send us a DM on Instagram or an email at uncommongoodpod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, wishing you every uncommon good, to do your uncommon good, to be the uncommon good. Hey fam, it's Polly. If you liked that video, want to join the conversation, be part of this community, click the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing uncommon good. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.